Leo, I have to tell you honestly, I do not usually react this strongly while preparing a message, but this time I genuinely had to pause halfway through because of how clearly everything lined up. 3 years. That number kept surfacing over and over as I sat with what is building around your life right now, and I want you to think carefully about what happened in your world roughly 3 years ago, because whatever began then, whatever shifted, ended, or quietly started taking root during that stretch of time, is directly connected to what is now finally reaching its completion. This is not a coincidence, and it is not a small moment. This is the culmination of something you have been carrying, sometimes consciously and sometimes without even realizing it, for a very long time. Think back honestly to that period. Maybe 3 years ago, you made a decision that felt uncertain at the time, walking away from something comfortable to pursue something that scared you slightly. Maybe 3 years ago, something ended that you did not choose. A relationship, a job, a version of your life you had gotten used to, and you were left to rebuild from a place that felt unfamiliar and difficult. Maybe 3 years ago you planted a seed so small you barely noticed it, a conversation, a skill you started learning, a relationship you began building slowly and quietly. Whatever it was specifically for you, that moment mattered far more than it probably felt like at the time, and everything that has happened since then has been part of a long, patient process of that decision finally maturing into something real. I want to ground this in something concrete, because a wait this long deserves more than a vague reassurance that good things are coming. Picture someone who, 3 years earlier, took an enormous risk, leaving a stable but unfulfilling job to pursue something they genuinely cared about, without any guarantee it would actually work out. The first year was difficult, filled with self-doubt and financial uncertainty. The second year showed small, quiet signs of progress. Nothing dramatic, just enough encouragement to keep going. Then, in the third year, everything they had built during those quieter years suddenly converged. A body of work finally caught the right attention. Relationships they had nurtured patiently finally opened doors. And what had felt like 3 years of slow, uncertain effort suddenly resolved into something that completely changed their financial situation and their sense of purpose almost overnight. When people describe moments like that, they often say the same thing. It felt like everything they had endured over those years finally made complete sense in a single moment of arrival. This is the exact shape of energy currently surrounding you, Leo. Whatever you have been quietly carrying, working toward, or healing from over these last 3 years is approaching its natural point of completion. I want to be clear that this does not mean the entire 3 years were painful. For some of you, it may have been a slow, steady climb rather than a dramatic struggle. But either way, there has been a long arc building, and that arc is now reaching the part of the story where everything finally clicks into place. Money and career carry significant weight in what is approaching. If 3 years ago you started something, a business idea, a new career path, a skill you began developing from nothing, this period favors that effort finally producing tangible, visible results rather than continuing to feel like slow, invisible progress. If 3 years ago you experienced a financial setback, a loss, a difficult period that reshaped how you manage money, this is the window where the version of financial stability you have been quietly working to rebuild since then finally becomes real rather than aspirational. There is also a relational thread running through this period. If 3 years ago a relationship ended, whether painfully or simply through circumstances shifting, this window may bring closure, clarity, or even an unexpected reconnection that finally puts that chapter fully to rest. If 3 years ago you began building a new relationship, whether romantic or otherwise. This is a strong period for that connection to reach a new, deeper level of commitment or recognition, the kind of milestone that makes the years of steady building feel completely worth it. I want to be honest about something important here too, because a 3-year arc reaching completion does not always feel purely joyful in the very first moment. Sometimes it feels overwhelming, precisely because of how long you have been waiting for it. If you feel a wave of emotion when this arrives, disbelief, tears, a strange mixture of relief and exhaustion, understand that this reaction is not a sign of ingratitude. It is simply the natural response to finally putting down something heavy that you have been carrying for a very long time. As we move into the second part of this message, I want you to hold on to the sense that this is not some distant, abstract possibility. It is a real arc that has been building since a specific point roughly 3 years ago, and it is now reaching its conclusion. In part 2, we are going to talk about exactly which areas of your life this completion is most likely to touch, how to recognize the signs as they arrive, and how to actually let yourself feel the full weight of this moment when it finally reaches you. Let's go deeper into this, Leo, because a 3-year arc reaching its conclusion touches different parts of your life in different ways, and I want you to know precisely where to look so you recognize exactly what is unfolding. One of the strongest areas this completion is likely to show up is your career, particularly if you made a significant decision around 3 years ago that felt risky or uncertain at the time. If you left something familiar to pursue something that mattered more to you, even though it initially came with financial or emotional cost, this period favors that decision finally being validated in a way that leaves no room for doubt about whether it was the right choice. Let me offer a grounded example of how this can unfold for a real person. Picture someone who, 3 years earlier, decided to go back to school or pursue a certification in a completely new field, despite already being established in a different career, taking on financial strain and self-doubt along the way. The first year felt overwhelming. The second year felt like slow, uncertain progress, constantly wondering if the sacrifice would actually pay off. Then, in the third year, that same person is offered a position in their new field that not only matches their previous salary but exceeds it, specifically because of the unique combination of experience from their old career and expertise from their new one. The years that felt uncertain suddenly reveal themselves as necessary steps towards something that could not have happened any other way. This is exactly the kind of long arc, reaching visible completion that is currently forming around your life. Money continues to carry real weight throughout this period, especially if 3 years ago marked some kind of financial reset for you, a debt you started paying down, a business you started building from very little, a decision to change your relationship with spending and saving entirely. This window favors that long, patient rebuilding, finally showing visible, tangible results. Not just a small improvement, but a genuine shift that makes the effort of the last 3 years feel completely justified. Watch for financial developments this month that feel disproportionately positive compared to what you were expecting, because that disproportion is often a sign that you are witnessing the payoff of years of quiet, consistent effort rather than a random stroke of luck. Relationships deserve particular attention here as well, especially if something significant shifted in your relational life around 3 years ago. If a relationship ended during that period, whether through a breakup, a falling out, or simply drifting apart, this window carries real potential for closure, understanding, or even a meaningful, unexpected reconnection that allows you to finally close that chapter completely rather than continuing to carry unresolved feelings about it. If instead you began building something new around that time, a friendship, a partnership, a family connection, this is a strong period for that relationship reaching a new significant milestone, engagement, a deepened commitment, a moment of recognition that confirms everything you have built together over these last few years has been genuinely worth the effort. I also want to speak honestly about personal growth here, because sometimes the most significant 3-year arc is entirely internal rather than external. If 3 years ago you were dealing with anxiety, grief, or a difficult period of self-doubt, and you have spent the years since then slowly, quietly working on yourself, this period favors that internal work finally showing up as visible confidence, peace, or clarity in your daily life. Sometimes the biggest completion is not a dramatic external event at all. It is simply waking up one day and realizing you are no longer carrying the same weight you were carrying 3 years ago. And that realization itself can feel just as significant as any external achievement. I want to prepare you honestly for the fact that this completion, while ultimately positive, might stir up some complicated emotions initially, especially nostalgia or grief for the version of yourself that existed 3 years ago, the one who could not have imagined things would turn out this way. Allow yourself to feel that complexity without rushing past it, because acknowledging how far you have actually come is part of what makes this moment land with its full emotional weight, rather than feeling hollow or rushed. There is also a theme of validation running through this period. Finally receiving proof that the choices you made 3 years ago, even the ones that felt uncertain or risky at the time, were actually the right ones. This validation might come from an external source, a specific result, a specific person acknowledging your growth, or it might come purely from within, a quiet, internal knowing that you made it through something difficult and came out stronger on the other side. Either way, let this validation land fully, rather than immediately moving on to the next goal without pausing to acknowledge what you have actually accomplished. As we move toward the final part of this message, I want you to hold on to the sense that this arc is genuinely reaching its conclusion right now, not as a distant possibility, but as something actively unfolding around you in this exact stretch of time. In part 3, we are going to talk about how to fully receive this completion instead of rushing past it, and I will leave you with something clear and meaningful to carry with you the moment this video ends. Here is something important I want to leave you with, Leo, because reaching the end of a long, significant arc is not just about receiving good news. It is about actually allowing yourself to feel the full weight of how far you have come. And a surprising number of people rush straight past that recognition toward whatever comes next, without ever fully acknowledging what they just accomplished. This period asks something different of you. It asks you to pause, even briefly, and actually let this moment mean something before you move forward into whatever comes after it. Let me offer a grounded example of what this looks like in practice. Picture someone who spent 3 years rebuilding their life after a significant setback, working quietly and consistently without much outside recognition along the way. When the moment of completion finally arrives, a financial milestone, a career achievement, a relationship reaching a meaningful point, their first instinct is to immediately shift focus to the next goal, barely pausing to acknowledge what they just accomplished. Years later, looking back, that person often expresses regret that they did not take a moment to genuinely celebrate how far they had come, because that lack of acknowledgement left the achievement feeling strangely hollow despite how significant it actually was. Compare that to someone who, upon reaching a similar milestone, took real time to reflect, to celebrate, to actually feel proud of the distance they had traveled. That person tends to describe their sense of fulfillment as far deeper and more lasting, even though the external circumstances were remarkably similar. So here is what I want you to actively do as this 3-year arc reaches its conclusion. First, when this completion arrives, whatever form it takes for you specifically, resist the urge to immediately move on to the next thing without pausing first. Sit with the moment, acknowledge it fully, Let yourself actually feel proud rather than rushing straight past pride toward the next goal. Second, tell someone who has been part of this journey with you. Someone who watched you struggle 3 years ago and is now watching you arrive here. Because sharing this moment with someone who understands its full context deepens how meaningful it feels. Third, take time to genuinely reflect on who you were 3 years ago compared to who you are now, not to dwell in the past, but to fully appreciate the distance you have actually traveled, because that appreciation is part of what makes an arc like this feel complete, rather than simply moving straight into the next chapter without ever closing the last one properly. I also want to give you something practical to hold on to, not just an internal reflection. If there is someone from 3 years ago who was part of that original chapter, a mentor, a friend, a family member who supported you through the difficult early stages, consider reaching out to them now to share how far things have come, because that kind of full circle moment often deepens the emotional significance of everything you have built since then. If there is a specific goal tied to this 3-year arc that you have been circling without quite finishing, use this window of momentum to finally complete it, because the energy currently surrounding you strongly favors closure over continued open loops. Trust that finding this message today was not accidental. Out of everything competing for your attention, you found your way here right as this 3-year arc is reaching its natural conclusion. And that timing matters because it means part of you was already sensing that something significant was approaching completion even before you had a clear way to name exactly what it was. The version of you standing fully in this completed arc, proud, settled, and genuinely at peace with everything the last 3 years required of you, is closer than it currently feels. And the way you choose to meet this moment, pausing to honor it rather than rushing past it, is what determines how fully you get to feel everything this arc has been building toward. Before you go, I want you to do one simple thing to honor this moment. If this message feels like it is speaking directly to something that began roughly 3 years ago in your own life, comment the words, "I made it," below this video, and let that be your acknowledgement of everything you have carried and built since then. I would also genuinely love to know what began for you around 3 years ago that you feel is finally reaching its completion right now. A career shift, a relationship, a personal transformation, or simply a quieter kind of healing? Share it in the comments, because your story might be exactly what someone else scrolling through today needs to read to keep going through their own difficult middle chapter. And if this message resonated with you, make sure you subscribe to this channel so you never miss the next message that reaches you at exactly the right moment. Leo, 3 years is a long time to carry something, and you are finally allowed to set it down and feel proud of everything it took to get here.